And now, please stand as our great leader will say a few very important words. Citizens of Frank, I present to you our great leader.
All right, welcome. I actually am coming down with a cold, and I've been in bed all afternoon, and I decided I would write a little fan fiction. I've never done that before. This is a piece that's inspired by Lena Dunham's recent little video cartoon that she made with her dad, talking about kind of like the extinction of straight white men. I don't know if it was a joke or what, because everything she does is like that. So I don't want to say too much here. Hopefully my voice will hold out, but I'll start now. So this is the beginning of my piece, and I don't have a title for it yet, but maybe I'll put it on the podcast when I put it up. So Lena Dunham, while charming, seems a detached, grandiose, and profoundly disturbing woman to me, and it seems to many others. Let me explain. When Lena wants to take down her own weird dad, who incidentally devotes himself to creating terribly fetishistic vagina art, she has to disguise and transform her private daughter Mutiny into an all-out civilizational takedown of straight white men. Men who choose to have sex with other men are somehow mysteriously exempted from this mandatory extinction. So unsettled am I by Lena's socially approved crime on men, straight white men, I have spent the day crystallizing and finally birthing, for your comfort, a theory of her unique madness. My hope is not to merely expose her mendacity, but more broadly to inoculate those vulnerable to her rank and, some might say, fetid incantations. There is an undeniable power to Lena. This can't be denied. But I am here holding a cautionary stance, as I believe the price paid for said power is beyond compare. In my humble estimation, an unwitting bankruptcy has occurred. This woman has suffered, unbeknownst to herself, a catastrophic loss of value. I do not believe the unpasteurized thoughts such individuals possess to be safe in any way, as the kids say. Safe space. That's not Lena's mind. Consume the ideas of Lena at your own peril. Without further ado, I will proceed with my working analysis. It is likely Lena Dunham's weird, vagina-fixated dad traumatized her with his obsession with profaning vaginas, making them look comic and ridiculous and displaying them in Lena's childhood home. Because he is, I don't know, an insecure, detached, uber-intellectualized, but well-respected artist, so confusing for Lena as a young child, I'm sure, it is probably no coincidence that suddenly Lena has out of whole cloth a campaign now in which all white men must be downgraded and made extinct. This woman is pathologically transparent. She simply cannot be any other way. In this sense, she is not fluid. She has one setting only, exposure. It must be terrifying not to know how to turn such a cruel setting off. My heart can only imagine. Oversharing is not always charming. It's as if someone inoculated her against a respectable and life-preserving opacity. It's painful to see through people sometimes. You have this instinctual urge to throw them a coat. But they will have none of it. They uniformly reject chivalry. See, there was a terrible conflict in young Lena's life. She was a pretty sharp young girl, and she suspected her father was not a very good man. She hated that she could see through him, felt cursed by what she saw, but she was also quick enough to realize she was better off not admitting her dad's nature to herself. Her dad was a brilliant man, everyone said so, and he was also one of the only people who seemed to give her much attention. But he also confused her terribly, and she didn't like to feel confused. Yet he seemed to even enjoy getting her all turned around. This made her angry, as she wasn't allowed to be dumb and not know things like other kids. She grew to secretly hate her father in a most secret part of herself, for she knew anybody who could find so much pleasure in disorienting a child was not a very nice person. This man, who she was bound to love, confused her developing mind beyond recognition, until she didn't know up from down. He thought he was setting her free from oppressive social constructs, ushering her outside of the small-minded society's cage. When random anger for him emerged in Lena, she reminded herself her father's heart was in the right place. She owed the continuance of her liberatory state from society to her father. He had taught her the dark side of trust, revealed to her the subtle trap that believing in sentimental lies can create. Still, sometimes when Lena saw other girls and women who seemed to live inside those trapped worlds, she wondered if her father was wrong. Over time, so as to deal with her growing grief and suffering, she took a page from her dad's book. She got to creating a kind of blueprint for an evolved restructuring of humanity, just as she had done her whole life. She decided to present her grand ideas to the media. As a lifelong merchant of confusion, she had never known a time when she wasn't their little darling. She was lucky like that, or, as some might say, privileged. What happened was this. Lena Dunham had pressed ahead and done some big social engineering math, lifting loads of people up and putting just straight white men down, while restructuring society to suit her personal pathologies. She found herself feeling a newfound relief. It felt great, and even though it was probably just temporary, as everything in her life was, she knew it was better than no relief at all. Deciding to extinguish straight white men felt sort of dangerous and kind of brilliant, like totally transgressive, which she knew would earn her some mega points with her father, who always perked up in a special way when she flashed him her dark side. He sort of worshipped her when she was being creative and doing things that other caged and ordinary women wouldn't dare think of doing. Lena still felt mildly ashamed of how much she still craved her father's inimitable approbation. She had long suspected she was a natural rule follower, but had wisely and swiftly learned to subvert that lesser and weaker part of herself that induced the worst sort of scorn in her family's artistic home. In their world, the sky was the limit. Even though she didn't really want the sky, but still struggled to reach it, so her parents would not perceive her longing for the ground. Rules, after all, were for people without creativity. Lena was always on the lookout for new ways to prove to her parents she had an enormous imagination. Perhaps searching in an overcompensatory manner. What if she one day realized she had little to none of this magical quality for which her parents so cherished her? It was a terrifying thought. As she feared for her existential self, its virtual extinction, she took to trying to learn from her father and his artsy friends what this mythical imagination looked like. She studied their ways like a spy. If she didn't have a real imagination, she comforted herself, she was beginning to believe she could learn to fake the existence of one. Her plan to save herself from parental rejection by creating a counterfeit imagination brought her enormous comfort. It felt exciting to have a secret from her father, and to this day, this secret remains her only one. For a time, in the early stages of its creation, before it slipped below and she forgot its beginnings, the knowledge of her fraudulence was her only real truth. It pleased her to discover that if she applied herself, it was really not that difficult to fool her father into thinking she was genuinely special. During her investigations, She had deduced there was a formula a person could enact that would simulate in that person the veritable appearance of a real imagination, and she couldn't believe her luck at figuring it out. She was pleased to notice that all she really had to do to be found special or creative was to notice those things other somewhat clueless people love and cherish, and do something to somehow destroy those things, to ruin their charm and fidelity. The trick was to make it seem like the destruction was a new form of creation, like art, with a purpose. It was a little mean and cruel, but in no time flat, Lena was the apple of her parents' eyes simply by courageously and artistically tarnishing what other people love and or cling to for false hope and meaning. She was liberating less evolved people from those false constructs. It felt a little bad, but a lot more good, like her soul was tingling, or something was tingling. Her parents were, as always, wowed and even stunned by their daughter's precocious irreverence. But it was really their friends in all the right high places that were truly most impressed with Lena's preternatural skill at deconstructing the world of meaning around her. The knowledge of her singular imagination, widely and roundly known, all was good in Lena's world. She was famous, big time. She wrote a book and even had a hit HBO series documenting the lives of privileged rich kids living in New York City. I was honestly impressed by the show until the last season when it lost its decadent coherence. I felt robbed in a weird way because at that point I realized Lena was pretty much unconscious of what was best about the show. Anyway, I digress. Back to her fame. All Lena really had to do to maintain her status was to continue to discover inventive ways to metaphorically pee on the cross. This is like a famous meme in the art world, and it's a thing. Anyway, there was actually an artist that I think put the cross in a jar of urine or something like that. Anyway, our girl Lena leapt at the chance to defecate on the sacred. I am losing it. Metaphorically speaking, of course. She knew in her heart the concept of self-sacrifice was outdated and really just kept people oppressed and bound to bad religion. But back to Lena's problem with her dad. That was like her original problem. Like, how could she deal with the fact that she hated him so much while not really being permitted to admit that to herself? It was really hard. Over time, no matter how her fame and influence spread, it wasn't enough to resolve this sticky problem. She sensed an emptiness inside of her that totally made no sense, as she wasn't trapped like lesser people, lesser women. She had come to live in the sky, not just touch it like her parents believed she should. There was a problem, and this really irked her. Transgressive pleasures were good for a lot of things, but she noticed they didn't seem to cure her anger at the man who was supposed to be her first love. Sometimes she wondered what her life would be like if she was normal and trapped. She wondered what it would be like to not be special. Her heart ached in those moments as she realized there was no way she could ever really know. No way at all. She was special for life, and she would have to learn to live with it, even if her specialness was only a trick. These moments of honesty weighed down on her and made her hate her father even more. She wished to destroy his influence in her special life, but realized that would be too dangerous and obvious and even sort of normal. She would have none of that. Ultimately, by a stroke of pure genius, Lena ultimately realized she somehow needed to manage a way to destroy all other straight white men in order to obfuscate her desire to bring her own father down to size. This she felt would be her most creative act, one she hoped would eventually release her from her lifelong path to destruction. To manage this epic and global takedown of her weird dad, she understood she would require considerable reinforcements. She would need people. She had people. It turned out Hillary Rodham Clinton really dug Lena's take down way of being in the world. That woman really just got her. Anyway, Hillary happened to be running for the first woman president of the USA. At the time, she shared Lena's deep and abiding yearning to also be finally released from the world of men. Together, they exchanged stories of bad male behavior, and within no time, they had devised a creative strategy for the extinction of straight white men. It felt good to be so productive and to finally have an actual plan. Lena contacted some of her artist friends to make a video to put on the internet, inside which she would ask her father's opinion about her takedown of straight white men. Her dad, it turned out, not that Lena was all that surprised, was actually fine about the extinction and felt proud of Lena for making the new reality public and official. No more cover-ups, no more pretending. Let's do this thing. The DNC was also absolutely thrilled because none of those straight white men liked Hillary enough to vote for her. In fact, much to her chagrin, they comprised much of her opposition. She felt them ill and a disease on not just her country, which, if she was really honest, she didn't really care too much about, but rather a disease on the entire world, like a big pile of you-know-what stinking up planet Earth. Lena admired Hillary's willingness to face her hatred of men head-on, and this inspired her to lean even more deeply into her ancient, proverbial hatred of her father, of other men. At this point, Lena really thinks her hatred of her father is all about other men. When Lena worried if her hatred of straight white men would come back to bite her relationship with her father, she reminded herself the man wasn't truly straight, but fell somewhere else, probably on the gender-fluid spectrum. She knew he wasn't exactly typical in his sexual identity or expression. He had a vagina fetish, after all. She thought his obsession with the vagina indicated a wish to perhaps express an identity that had from birth been unfairly denied him. When she thought of her destruction of men and how empowered she felt by it, she was proud of her dad for also having deflowered the enduring and oppressive sacredness of the pussy, so popularly maintained in the collective imagination. Her father's epic takedown of women was so cool and confirmed her suspicions that her dad had a terribly, terribly massive imagination. When she stepped back and looked down upon their joint destruction, she couldn't help but let out a big, fat, juicy smirk. Her dad was responsible for destroying women for her. He took them all down to size. For her. Thanks, Dad. So she wouldn't ever feel minimized or small in relation to any of them, on the odd chance that maybe one amongst them might have been superior. What she and Hillary were planning to do now to straight white men, her father had long ago done for women. We all stand on the shoulder of giants. She couldn't believe it. They were two peas in a pod. Geniuses. Evil geniuses. But it couldn't be any other way. Because if you follow the rules and try to care and protect things, you can't really be a creative person. The only way to be a genius without the evil qualifier was to possess actual talent. That didn't matter. None of her mom and dad's artist friends, seemed to care about old-fashioned talent anyway. They thought it oppressive, exclusive, but most importantly, a mere accident of nature, which made it totally useless and banal. True genius simply required a little funky thinking and a willingness to shock and startle innocent and naive people by any means necessary. So, that's the story of why Lena D. and her running mate in crime decided to extinguish straight white men. 2 days before the election, Democratic voters are absolutely eating it up, or perhaps choking it down, The funny thing is, from what I gather from the media, it turns out bashing straight white men only really upsets straight white men and some of the people who are related to them, like their families. It appears as if the majority of folks are perfectly happy to help Lena and Hillary throw these guys under the bus, society's collective bus. Lena was more than a little pleased by the fabulous reception her re-engineering of the social realm was having. She felt her campaign not only revealed the mega size of her imagination to the entire sort of free world, it also showed she was a good person. When she considered all the bad things straight white men had done, not just to women in her own country, which she didn't care too much about, but really just more all of humanity, she felt slightly less evil. Her mission accomplished, she felt not exactly good. She didn't believe in good, but only in being fully alive. At some point in time, it is possible, Lena may discover the paucity of imagination taking a whole category of people down implies. It's hard to tell the future, though some do try. Many might wonder how things might have turned out differently for straight white men if only Lena had been able to confront her father. Maybe if the man had been easier to love and respect, she wouldn't have needed to extinguish anyone. It's all water under the bridge now. In her heart, Lena knew and understood and accepted that her father, beloved father, could only be exactly what he was. Without that exactitude inside his beautiful and transgressive liberation, he would cease to be Lena's father. And then he would no longer be special. Lena knew her father needed very badly to see himself as above other people, though he stated otherwise for all the world to hear in the video she posted on the internet. She knew hovering above others was her father's preferred position. What right did she have to make him alter his preferred position? To make him something he was not would have been wrong. It would have revealed her own repressive and intolerant, bigoted nature, her only secret. Such honesty was too much to ask of any person. Truly, such honesty was unrealistic and unfair. To manage the quandary, Lena simply contacted a few people who agreed her problems would be more easily addressed by altering the identity and ranking of all men, the straight white ones. In so doing, Lena literally buried her weird dad's oddness and imperfections inside the bodies of all men she and her people agreed it was best to extinguish. Now that the deed was done, she knew her own dad wasn't really bad at all. She was able to see that bad isn't really bad, per se. It's simply contextual, a highly fluid location prone to constant shifting. Through all her campaigning efforts, Lena also realized that thinking some things are good or better or best is what hurts the most. Doing that, well, that was like creating a hierarchy, and hierarchies hurt people a lot, and not all people win in a hierarchy. After campaigning for the extinction of straight white men, Lena was more than certain there really were no good men, except gay men and men of color, or gender differences, or differently abled men. Considering all of this, she felt much less sad about what she feared she had missed. Now that she knew that the goodness of those other dads was only a socially constructed illusion, she was good. She wanted others to be made free too, liberated from those resentments that mirrored her own. Through all these efforts, she felt a temporary lifting of her suffering, though it was only a passing relief. A day of honest destruction is never done. The morrow would come, and she would need to get out there and keep finding new and shocking ways to make herself lovable again. Sometimes still, in her even darker moments, despite all her wild successes and diverse successes, Lena finds herself sticking her mind's finger into her deepest and most unorthodox and eternal longings. Like a naughty child, she plays with her wish for a daddy like any other, one who doesn't need to devote his mind and heart and his soul to the creation and promotion of colorful but primitivistic vaginas. Lena wonders if it would have been what it would have been like to learn about her own body in her own time, to experience the sheer purity and darkness of childhood, of privacy, the impenetrable force and pressure of it growing alone inside of her, her own private self, packed and multiplying like something with real potential, real promise, a life of its own. Safe now in its exile, she senses this to be a living part of her, one she could neither see nor whore. Lena is aware of her emptiness. She lacks having that feeling of fullness that comes when you save up and store up the life inside of you. Cherish it. She wasn't permitted to cherish anything in her home. No, in that place, precious states as solitude were denied her. Now it felt as if she had been punctured by something sharp. Even if she had wanted to retain some bit of herself, she simply could not. Something inside her, somewhere inside her, there was a hole through which everything, fresh and new, drained into the indifferent world. Her hole was just like the big black one painted crudely on the plump but playful woman her father was so fond of depicting. Because of her fateful and hidden puncture wound, Lena understood herself doomed to keeping anything private or sacred inside of her. But somehow, almost like a consolation, she always remembers the power and rewards to be gained by preemptively profaning even the smallest of her impressions. Selling the secrets of her life has made her rich. She can't imagine a life in which a secret is worth more to her, concealed. Secrets were only valuable when bartered. She knew she was a psychological prostitute, but aren't we all? In time, Lena came to view even privacy as a ridiculous and oppressive artifice. She didn't have privacy, so it was natural she came to believe it worthy of the same treatment as straight white men. Extinction. The only grace in this story is the final privacy, the incorruptible safety Lena holds, but will never personally know. For if she really knew herself, I fear she would kill that girl. For now, the tiny, unknown creature is beheld only in the eyes of strangers uninfluenced by her spell. Strangers like myself. I see her now, the tiny exile, crouched from prey, her heart beating softly, hoping this present danger will pass, forever wondering if the monster will be satisfied with her newest sacrifice. Or if it will one day sniff her out as if she is life itself. This life hidden, this darling captive's original sin.